Okay, I have a busted up left hand. If you can come in here, you see I have a little thing there. This is from playing basketball. I busted my left carpal navicular 2 times in the same place, and it's a non-union. So my hand and arm tend to not be used much because it hurts all the time. And one of the things that I was very fortunate to experience when I was teaching string figures was the idea of symmetric movements of the hands, because it forced my left hand to do the same thing that my right hand was doing, and it was like therapy because it kept my left hand at least useful, whereas if I had just given in to the pain, I would have a useless left hand. But let's talk about how my theory of learning string figures fits into this. The first figures are the 2-loop figures, and generally they can be accomplished with symmetric movements of the hands, and you get an even figure if you are even in the way you use your hands. But notice how my left hand does not work like my right hand. My right hand is fully, and my left hand is kind of gimped up. But that was Osage 2 diamonds, Osage 4 diamonds, or Jacob's ladder is a very good exercise because you can see that the hands are doing the same thing, and I get a fairly symmetric figure. But there's definitely a readout of how uneven I am on my left hand and right hand movements because of the fact that my left hand is weak and cannot have the same range of motion. Those are the 2-loop figures. And when you get to the 3-loop figures, it gets even more interesting because Tin Men is a figure that you should practice a way of doing it with symmetric movements of your hand, always keeping slight tension. And you'll notice that my middle finger sprays out there because that's the way my hand is. And in the Tin Men system, you have this loom, and you reach with your thumb, and you pull using usually the shoulder of that thumb. And if you pull the near little finger string and the top string and reach with your middle finger to lift out, push your thumb toward the center, drop, and you will have woven an A, and then you can do the same thing and lift, and you have Tin Men. And again, you have a readout of whether or not you are doing things evenly on both sides. Now, that is the beginning figure, and I'm going to use a slightly longer string now because I'm going to start talking about how you can use the Tin Men system to practice symmetry while you are investigating the different kinds of figures that you can make. So when you're doing Tin Men, you can do an A, which is the near little finger string. B, the far under is a B, far over is a C, near under then over the far is an E, and over then under is under then over is a D, over then under is an E, and of course you can down flip any of them in order to make the inverse weave. So there is an E prime B. Let's do an E prime B just to see what happens. It's not a very good figure, you see. So we will try something that I know works. An A. Notice how I am trying to be loosely in control as I do symmetric movements so that I can get a figure like this, which is ACA. And another thing you can do to keep testing whether or not your fingers are doing symmetric things is to drop and hold the bottom down, loosen the index so that you can reach and pull this one half a twist towards you, transfer everything to the thumb, come inside, lift out, and you will have gotten a position where there is a two loop. So you can proceed then to do your two diamond ending, and you can get a figure that you can use the power lift with. And it is a fairly impressively complex figure. And again, there is an absolute readout. And you'll see that my left hand and my right hand are slightly different, but not too bad. And the figure can be manipulated, of course, so that you can try to make it as even as you can. And there is an ACA, which is cleaning the top and adding two diamonds. We can do all sorts of different figures. You do not have to be limited to the 10 straight figures, weaves coming from the little fingers weave. You can do the A universe, which is going over the near lower index and picking up A or B or C or any of the 10 weaves. The B universe is over the near, the C universe is over both. So each of these universes, A, B, and C, capital A, capital B, capital C, have the 10 weaves. So you have 40 weaves. And 40 cubed is 1,664,000 different 3-weave patterns. So you have a pretty impressive possibility matrix to test. So let's just try some funny looking thing. Let's do a B prime, an A universe A, and an A prime. I mean, I don't have any particular reason for thinking this will be good, bad, or indifferent, but there is the figure, and you can see that it has almost all the information on the top. Well, you can again clean that top and add diamonds, hopefully without losing the symmetry of the beauty of the symmetry. But of course, if you have hands like mine, you tend to have less than the symmetry you would wish. But there is the figure, which is a little different than you might have imagined when you first saw the 3-weave pattern and then put it into this systematic. But you can see that my hands are pretty practiced at doing the same thing at the same time, because I have practiced making my 10-men figures in that way. And I will do one last little figure here, which I call the dancing diamond. And I'll use an A, and then a very strange weave. Pull like a B move on the top, but push the far lower index down and down flip it. And you can see that the symmetry is pretty good there, and that is the little dancing diamond. But let's test me this morning to see if my hand hurts too much to keep the symmetry as I finish this. And you can see that it is a little more delicate and difficult than what I have been doing. Add the diamonds. And the power lift. And you can see that that little diamond in the center is still pretty much diamondy. Diamondy, there's a fine word. And there is these lines tend to be parallel, but my left side there, this side over here, has collapsed, and this side has parallel lines, and that is a very, very sensitive readout of how uneven I am, even though I have learned to pretty much hold my symmetry movements together even with a damaged left hand. And it of course has kept my left hand at least moving, so I can still use a left hand, whereas it's a lot weaker than the right. But I can still use it in intricate designs because I have been practicing the string figures. Now, another series of figures that I make are the Native American Indian series, and the prototypical one of those, I will do it here very quickly. Again, notice the symmetry of the movements as I make the Inuit net, and it is pretty symmetrical. And that symmetry of movement is what you tend to want to do as you do longer and more complex figures. Another thing that I do is use loop manipulations. For example, I can roll that index loop, lift through the thumb, reach and pull the little finger down through the index, rotate, thumb up through, little finger down through, rotate, thumb up through, little finger down through, rotate once, rotate twice. And now I'm going to finish with the Inuit net. And you'll see that all of my hand throughout this operation, except for the scraping off the things I just did, are generally symmetrical movements. And I deliberately made this figure so that there would be an asymmetry in the center, and that is because I used an opening A, or an opening B. I think I probably did an opening A, but it was one of the A or B openings which caused the center to have that asymmetry. But that is a consequence of actually every string figure is asymmetrical, because we live in a chiral universe, which is a handed universe. The hands can go together that way, but not that way. And the chiral universe is a four-dimensional universe, and every four-dimensional reality is chiral or handed mathematically. And we have 3 dimensions of space and 1 of time, and the time is how we flex this torus on itself through time, so that a string figure is actually a 4-dimensional space-time vector held on the hands. Now I will do the same figure, but I won't do the whole thing. Up. Oh, didn't do that right. I have to first rotate, and then up, and then down, and then rotate, and then up, and then down. I'll do the whole thing, it doesn't matter, because this is, once you have gotten into a place where you can use your fingers dexterously, as if both were right-handed, if your fingers are trained to do the maneuvers and you have practiced, much like you practice playing the violin or the piano, you will be able to make all of these figures. And now you see, since I used the LDNA opening, I have a symmetric center. The same figure, but it's a symmetric center, and it shows, and that's one of the reasons I began using the LDNA and RDNA openings, is because they gave symmetric centers when I was doing my longer and longer figures. But I guess what I'm really talking about this morning is the fact that string figures not only allow you to learn to pay attention to what your fingers are doing, it not only rewires the brain of a young person as they are learning to do it, much like what instrumentalists do. They train the mind, they prune it, they make all of the connections more exact, and they are able to pay attention and do things such as learning other abstract systems much better, and they become much better learners and students. But they also can work on the symmetry movements, and the wiring of the brain can be more, much more connected from one side to the other. There is a thing of the brain called a corpus callosum, and it is a shunt, or a little thing at kind of the base of the brain that connects the two sides of the brain so that they can talk to each other. But in most people, the corpus callosum is fairly small. It is interesting that it is larger in women, by and large, than it is in men. And women tend to be much better at multitasking, at seeing 2 or 3 things happening at once, and understanding and integrating that information, whereas men don't. And that's a function of the number and the complexity of the connections between the two sides of the brain, because the two sides of the brain tend to do different sorts of things. But one of the things that I found after I had practiced and done symmetry movements again and again and again, that I was essentially training the sides of my mind, because the hands essentially map the greater part of the higher intellectual ordering part of the brain than any other part of the body. My hands were training the two sides of my brain to essentially connect more thoroughly and to share information, so that I actually became much better able to envision images. I could look across the room and see a student doing a string figure and understand exactly what was happening almost instantaneously, because I had become able to look at pattern, abstract geometric pattern, and decode it very quickly, and to link it up with the language of A weave, B weave, C weave, the language of keeping control, keeping order in A, B, A, keeping order in my way of doing. I end with this one. ABA is what I call my signature, because if you look closely, there is a huge sprawling M for Murphy, right in that figure, made by 2 parallel lines, and that's the end of my lecture today.